summer of my seventh grade year, Dolly Parton wrote her autobiography. It was called Dolly Parton, My Life and Other Unfinished Business. And it was the days before internet. I'm a teacher now, so um, I always tell my students, I was born in the 1900s. Back in my day, and I always have to do the finger, the internet has not always existed. And then they look at me like I'm a relic. But the internet did not exist. And the only way that I knew that Dolly Parton had written a book is she was on all the talk shows. She was on every talk show you turned on at the time. And in the summertime, I love daytime television. So I watched all the talk shows. And I would see her talk about this book. So I'm like, there must be something to this. I need to get my hands on a copy of this book and read it. So I begged my mother. I was like, Mama, did you know Dolly Parton's coming out with a book? Did you know Dolly Parton's written a book? Mama, if I see Dolly Parton's book, can I get a copy of that book? And finally she was like, I will get you a truckload of those books if you just stop talking about it. So just so happens, randomly, we were at the Cracker Barrel of all places, and lo and behold, what did they have? Brand new, hot off the press, a copy of Dolly Parton's book, My Life and Other Unfinished Business. There it was. It was a great book, had Dolly right on the front of it, big gold letters that just said Dolly. And I'm like, I have it. And I tore that book cover to cover. I read it. I even read the captions on the pictures. And I found out very quickly her unfinished business for a 12-year-old was not my business. But I fell in love with country music. I fell in love with songwriting, which I can't write songs, I can't play instruments. I have all the will, but no skill. I loved everything about it. I loved the history of it. And growing up close to Nashville, I mean, it was just technically down the road. So I fell in love with everything about it. And then I really did fit in the rest of middle school because I was then the big kid with an Elvis hairdo that loved Dolly Parton. Now, everybody's on the Dolly Parton wagon, and I wanted to say I was driving that first, just for the record. Y'all are jumping on, but I was on it when I was on it. I'm an OG. Just saying. So by the time I got to high school, I continued my fandom for Dolly Parton just because just the creativity. I love all things creative. And when I graduated high school, my mother worked a miracle. I don't know how she did it, but she did it. Dolly Parton was doing a one night only concert at the Ryman Auditorium, a place that I had never been, just read about. And she hadn't toured, she had no band, and this was just a one night only. Tickets went on sale at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, and by 9:15, every ticket was gone. So somehow my mother called up, because there's no internet, or if there was, we didn't have it, and she scored 3 tickets, one for me, one for her, and one for my grandmother. And we all sat separately in obstructed view seats in the Ryman Auditorium. And so I got to see Dolly Parton like that on the other side of a column. But it was magical because supposedly there were 2,500 other people in there. But I highly doubt it because when the curtain came up, she was singing straight to me. That curtain came up, she walked out, and it was just me and her. And it was the best night of my life. If I died that night, I would have died happy. All my dreams had come true. Well, I started college that was in May, and I started college in August. And just so happens, Dolly Parton was on my academic schedule. Because 4 years later, she hadn't toured in 4 years, so 4 years later, she was going to do what she did at the Ryman all over again, but this time at Dollywood. So somehow my mother she's worked a second miracle because she got tickets to see Dolly for my college graduation, this time at Dollywood. So I found out that Dolly was going to make a special park appearance before her concert that day. And I had cooked up a plan. She may not have remembered that 4 years earlier that she had sang to me. So I had to work, I had to make, I had to rekindle some memories. So I'm like, if Dolly can see me in the park, it'll be just like one of these serendipitous things. She'll see me, oh, I know who you are. I think we're best friends. Why don't you join the band? I don't play anything. That's fine. You can just give people something to look at. So I did what any good, well mannered, church raised Southern person would do when you go to East Tennessee. I got a t shirt airbrushed. And I got it airbrushed at Walmart because at the time they had an airbrush station in the Pigeon Forge Walmart, which I don't know if it's still there or not. But I had watched the Food Network before I had gone, and this is where the idea came from. They were doing this special on the Food Network about the places to eat barbecue at in Memphis. And as they were going to all the barbecue places in Memphis, they panned a telephone pole. And on this telephone pole was a big bumper sticker. And this bumper sticker said, "Trust Jesus and Elvis." And I'm like, if it works for Elvis, it'll work for Dolly. So when I went to that Walmart in Pigeon Forge, the artist was like, "What do you want on this shirt?" I guess they were used to, just some mountains and doves, Jimmy loves Bobby or whatever. I'm like, no, it has to say this, and it has to say it in big letters. And granted, I've been this size forever, so it was going to be big letters. I said, this shirt needs to say, "Trust Jesus and Dolly." Then you can put whatever else on it. So it was a gray shirt, black writing, and he wrote, "Trust Jesus and Dolly," and put Starburst on it. I'm like, this is perfect. I put the shirt on. The Starburst were in two very strategically placed locations, which I did not realize until I got it on. But it worked. I wore it. And so I got to Dollywood with my shirt, and I started thinking, tried to get in, this was like a reconnaissance mission, when I first got there. If I was Dolly Parton, and if I was at Dollywood, exactly where would I show up? So I'm like trying to think. I had the park map spread. This was like the situation room that I had spread out. And then I started asking people that worked there. Well, sometimes, I don't know. I'm just, no, this is my morning shift. Nobody was helpful. So I'm like, I will figure this out on my own. So I had my map out and I'm trying to think, looking at the layout. And then all of a sudden, a worker started unrolling police tape, but it didn't say police tape. It said Dolly's route. And so as she was unrolling this, she was like, "Excuse me, pardon me, can you hold this, please? Excuse me, pardon me," just going down the line. And she got to me, she said, "Excuse me, pardon me, can you hold this?" And I'm like, "I'm busy, I'll hold it." And then she went on down the line. And then when I glanced down and saw it said Dolly's route, I was at the front of the line with my Trust Jesus and Dolly t-shirt on. I'm like, this is the third miracle of my lifetime. So I'm like, I just pitched the map and I put a death grip on the tape and I just stood there. And then people started to fill in behind the tape and it just made this perfect little road down through the way. And then in the far distance, you could hear an old car, like a car from the turn of the 20th century, like just like something chugging along. And here it come. It was a car from the early 20th century, and perched on top of it was Dolly Parton, surrounded by all these flowers. It looked like she just won the Kentucky Derby. There were so many flowers on this car. So it was coming around the corner, and she was smiling and she was waving. And I knew two planets were about to align. But I'm like, I've got to figure out something to say. And the only thing that I could think of was, "Dolly, look at my shirt." And so with the death grip, I leaned back, and then she turns around and glances over her left shoulder and puts out a very perfectly manicured hand and goes, "Ha." At that moment, the earth stopped turning. You may have felt it. This was around September of 2005. And I just stood there because a lightning bolt came out of that finger and hit me right in the middle of my chest. And I just stood there. I was frozen. And these people started to disperse and they were like, "That was it? That was it?" I'm like, "No, yes, that was it. That was the greatest moment of my life." And then I'm just standing there, and my grandmother's like, "Good Lord, Charlie, come on, you're embarrassing me." So she had to lead me over to a bench, and we just sat there for a minute. We went to the concert. I did not join the band, for the record, in case you were wondering. Dolly never spoke to me other than publicly laughing at me, which I will take, just saying. But a few more years passed after that moment. And this lady I went to church with worked for a company um, that partnered with another company that was a sponsor of the Grand Ole Opry. And she just came up to me at church one Sunday morning, and she said, "You like Dolly Parton, right?" And then I tried to be cool because I still had hair, and I still had kind of doing the Elvis thing. I'm like, "Oh yeah, she's fine. Yeah, yeah, a little bit." She's like, "Did you know she's going to be at the Grand Ole Opry?" And then internally, I'm like, "Absolutely, I've already got my tickets." And she's like, "Would you like to go backstage?" And yes. And she's like, "Oh, I can, that's no problem. Um, I'm friends with Chuck. He works for this milk company, wink, wink, that was a sponsor of the Grand Ole Opry. And he said he can get you backstage if you want to. You just have to follow some instructions, which sound kind of shady, but they're legit, I promise. You just got to meet him the night before the show in the Shoney's all-you-can-eat buffet parking lot. And he's going to pull up in a beat-up Chevrolet. And he'll just come tap on your window and he'll ask if you're Charlie, and you just say yes, and you just follow him, and he will get you to where you need to be. I'm like, all of this sounds legit. So I say, let's go. So as it turns out, I showed up in the parking lot of the Shoney's All You Can Eat buffet. A beat up Chevrolet pulled up. There was a knock on the window, asked if I was Charlie. I said, "Sure enough." And he said, "Just follow me." And I did. And roads gave way to smaller roads, and smaller roads gave way to gravel. And the next thing I know, I am in the parking lot of the artist entrance of the Grand Ole Opry. Everybody that was playing at the Opry that night was parking in that parking lot. So I'm like, wow, this is legit. So I got out of the car and followed into the back of the Opry, which is this long, just paved sidewalk. It's got a red awning on it, and you go through two double glass doors, almost like you did when you came in here. But when you go in, there's this massive portrait of cousin Minnie Pearl. If you're familiar with the Grand Ole Opry, you know who Minnie Pearl is. But one thing that struck me about this portrait, I think it's a testament to the community that comes with performers and artists and country music and this, that, and the other, is it wasn't a portrait of her. It was her, but it wasn't like of her face. It's a portrait of Minnie Pearl, and it's huge. And it's her standing on a stage, and it's painted from her back. So all you see is Minnie Pearl's back standing on the stage talking, but you know exactly who it is. You see the black shoes, one says Minnie, one says Pearl, the white stockings. And a fun fact, my grandparents, my grandfather, his name was Haskell. My uncle, his brother, was named Baskell. And he had a brother named Edward. And they had a little sister that my great grandparents thought was going to be a boy because they had three boys already. So this was before ultrasounds, before you got surprised, like, hey, you had a baby. What is it? A baby. It you've just found out there. So they thought they were having a boy. So when my aunt was born, they did not have a name for her. So they decided, hey, we listened to the Grand Ole Opry over the weekend. Minnie Pearl is a good name for a baby. So they named my great aunt Minnie Pearl, and she goes by Pearl to this day. And she met Minnie Pearl at a Kentucky education conference of all places. And she says, I'm named after you. And Minnie Pearl said, you won't believe how many times I've heard that exact same story. A baby was born and they needed a name, so they named him Minnie Pearl. So I already felt like I had a connection when I went backstage at the Opry. But you turn right at the Minnie Pearl portrait, and there was a podium, and everybody had to sign in at that podium. My name was on the same piece of paper as Dolly Parton's. And we wound through the backstage area, which is a maze of dressing rooms and people tuning up instruments and talking and meeting, and good to see you. It's been a long time. And we wound through all that. And it was one of those times where I just wanted to make sure that I was soaking in every single thing that I was seeing, because I knew I was in a piece of history. So my fearless leader that got me back there was winding me through this big open black square. And he took us to the stage of the Grand Ole Opry, and he said, here's your seats. So if you're not familiar, the traditional barn backdrop is that of the Grand Ole Opry, but they always have about 3 church pews right there in front of the barn. So I had a secure seat right there on one of those church pews. And I'm just trying to soak this in as I'm sitting there on the stage, and I'm looking up, and there's this huge red curtain that has to be 3 stories tall. And little Jimmy Dickens was one of the first ones up, and he was getting ready for his set. The musicians were coming up, tuning up, and they were just milling around. And then the announcer says, welcome to the Grand Ole Opry, and that huge 3-story curtain just goes all the way up to the ceiling, and you can just feel the people out there. You really couldn't see them, but you could feel them. And I'm like, wow, this is a piece of cultural history. So I'm enjoying the show, and as I look over to my left, there's this woman that looks familiar. And I'm like, I know her. I don't know how I know her, but I know her. And I look back about 3 times, and it was Dolly Parton. She was just standing there. She was just standing there as just Dolly, just a friend, just talking to this little girl, shaking hands. And then the announcer of the Opry said, please welcome to the stage, Grand Ole Opry star, Dolly Parton. And then all of a sudden, this light went on, this spark. And the woman that was just standing in the wings became the Dolly Parton that you see on TV. The one that I saw when I graduated high school, the one that I read about when I was in middle school, the one I saw at Dollywood, the one that publicly laughed at me, which I'm still very appreciative of. She walked out on that stage, and she was electrifying. You could just feel the energy. And it dawned on me in that moment that, sometimes some people belong to the world. Some people are here to electrify the masses. But no matter how weird you are, no matter if your hair whistles in middle school, no matter what you go through, you may feel like nobody's looking, but you could be the light in somebody's world that you may never, ever, ever, ever know about. So just because you don't have an audience doesn't mean that people aren't watching. Thank y'all.